Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the 23rd SF Doc Fest. We're so excited to have filmmakers joining us here today. For our shorts programs that are actually going to be playing with our feature films live at the Roxy as well in this package, which you, amazing audience member, have decided to go on a ride with us. So thank you so much. I'm Sarah Flores. I program the shorts here at SF Doc Fest. And I would love to introduce our filmmakers. Welcome, filmmakers. I'll kind of just call on you, and if you could please introduce yourself, let us know which film you're here with and what you did on the film and what made you want to tell your amazing stories. And Drew, I'm going to kick it off with you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for this. Yeah, I'm Drew, they, them. I directed and co-shot and edited Compton's 22. And yeah, just a little bit about how it got started. I was moving to the Bay Area for grad school and had been reading Susan Stryker, who's the historian who kind of did all of the original archival interviews in the film. I was reading her book, Transgender History, and learned about the Compton's cafeteria riot for the first time. And I am from San Diego and, had spent most of my life in California and never heard of it before. I think, like a lot of people, I kind of just knew of Stonewall as kind of the beginning of the queer rights movement in the US. And so I had the opportunity to go into the GLBT Historical Society archives, where all of these interviews were housed at the time just on VHS tapes, and digitize them, and just had a really meaningful experience with that process, listening to trans people talk about what it was like to live in San Francisco in the 60s, and kind of decided from there that I wanted to recreate that process with other young trans artists in the area.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, Kaya. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what film you're here with and what made you want to tell this story?
Hi, my name is Kaya Jordan. I directed, edited, and shot Like a Stoner Flower. I knew starting out, I made this over the summer that I wanted to create a documentary, but I wasn't completely sure like where I wanted to go with the purpose and the direction. And I was a part of this art residency program in San Francisco called Problem Children. And I ended up talking to a lot of people there, and I was just sort of talking about artistry as a whole, and I realized that that was something that I wanted to explore. I also knew that I wanted to do something around like generations and interviewing people of different generations and sort of exploring their stance on like a singular topic. And I ended up having a conversation with an artist at the Minnesota Street Project, the art book fair there, and we had this really like lengthy conversation about how the ability of art to transcend like language and rationality, and how it's this very like specialized sort of method for expression. And it was just this like mind-blowing conversation I had with them, and I knew that I wanted to sort of take that idea of like the unique capabilities of art and bring that to different people and different artists and sort of hear their perspective on it. Um, I originally had from the documentary, I was sort of more thinking it was going to be rooted in like Asian American identity, but like after that conversation, I sort of took it in the more like artistic and like focusing on art direction, and then just had interviews with two other artists, a 14-year-old visual artist and then a 27-year-old dancer, I believe, and just had conversations with them about their art and their practice and sort of what art means to them. And then from there, from my 9 hours of footage, I sort of weave together a narrative of sort of their experiences and perspective across generations and across different disciplines.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So glad to have you here. And Valentine, you're kind of the odd man out, I guess. You're the subject of your own story. So
Yeah,
you can introduce yourself and, you know, remind us what film you're here with, and then tell us a little bit about what the process was like for you to kind of have your story being told.
well, thank you. I am Valentin from Argentina. I arrived 1 year ago here, and the month that I arrived here, I met Paul, that is the filmmaker, the one who makes the film. I'm just the artist who he makes the documentary. But yeah, Paul likes we met in a gallery 1 year ago, and he presented my work to make a documentary of my work. So yeah, I do something that I'm an art director in advertising. So with my art, I try to create an allegory between art and advertising in an abstract way. That's what Paul finds interesting in my work. So he makes this documentary that tells the story about my inspirations that I have here in San Francisco, and how I transform this inspiration in these works. And the documentary tells about the exhibitions that I make here in San Francisco and New York the last year, and how was this process. So it was very exciting to make this film together.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, of course.
Hi, Stephen. Why don't you give us your deal? Let us know your name, your film, and what made you want to tell this story.
Hi, good morning. I'm Steven, and I directed, shot, and edited Memory Palace. I think I wanted to start. I didn't have the idea for this documentary from the get-go. I had a lot of footage was the main thing. Just capturing my experiences in the Bay Area after moving here in 2022 after graduating college. And after living here for about 1 year, I really wanted to kind of like make sense of like all the experiences that I had here, like being freshly independent. And then that feeling was followed by a bunch of other formative experiences that made me just feel very nostalgic, such as visiting my childhood home, and then also like seeing my parents' hometown for the first time since I was like a 9-month-old. And those stories ended up weaving their way into my mind and like took up so much space that I was like, oh, I want to like cover this too. And um, so I ended up like doing some like mental gymnastics almost to try to like make these experiences all kind of fit under sort of like a theme and a narrative, which ended up being the basis of Memory Palace. So like basically, it became like a ode to like nostalgic experiences and really like emotional spaces that all of those places were and still are to me. And so yeah, like after having all of those experiences, I went through all the footage, and I got a lot of footage of like my family too, and made kind of try to make meaning out of it through this film.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And Kaya, I'm going to come back to you because I know that you're in a liminal space, and it might have to jump. So I'd love to come back to you and just talk to you a little bit more about like how you identified the artists that you did decide to include in the film. Like, what was that process like, and how did you kind of find your through line as to how you're examining their approach to their art making?
Yeah, I met one of the artists through the art book fair. I was there, and some of the people, the residency people I was with, had some connections. They knew some people, and that was how I ended up talking to the 6-year-old sculpturist Ahelio. And then one of the other artists was actually my sister, the 14-year-old one. So that was not such a hard find, and I knew that I wanted to include her because having such a young perspective in the film was something that I thought was be pretty crucial in terms of comparing different generations and their generational sort of perspectives. And then I did have a little bit of trouble finding the last artist, but that was just sort of more, it happened, it was another connection through some of the other artists at the residency, and that sort of came about. So I didn't really focus super specifically on which artist I was getting. I more like, once I had those three artists, I sort of had these pretty lengthy interview processes where I would just sit down for a few hours and just talk to them about like a really broad variety of subjects covering like their art and in intersection with their identity, and also just the ability of art to sort of push boundaries in terms of their own creative expression. And I went into each of the conversations not having a super specific list of questions, especially after that last interview. And sort of through covering such a wide range of topics and having these really lengthy interviews, I was able to sort of like see a through line in each of the artists' perspectives, which was really interesting. And it was sort of the ability of art to sort of express something that really nothing else can. And that was something that sort of drove the narrative and created a through line between these three people who previously didn't have anything in common that I knew of besides the fact that they were artists. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. If you have to jump, we'll be sad, but we'll understand. Have a good rest of your day. Hi, Drew. I'd love to move over to talk about your film. I just have to say, right, like timing is so interesting in terms of the state of queer and particularly trans politics in this country in this moment. But if you look back through this lens, right, there's a reason why it took so long to uncover this history, right? Like history is often written by, I guess, since they would the victor, I would maybe say the oppressor. And it's a credit to our librarians and archival people that are keeping these memories alive, and but also to filmmakers like you. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about like, did today's social climate make it feel like it was imperative to tell this story? I guess this is a long question, so parse it out and do it with it as you will. And in retelling this memory and realizing that it was kind of a hidden part of our history, like how was it approaching the performers, the contemporary performers that you were working with? Was there like a process of education within that space? And how was that process of working with them to kind of bring their performances alive?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. Yeah, I'll try to answer it quickly, but I definitely I think a large part of how the social climate played into it is just through my own experience of digitizing the material. I was, I think, feeling pretty yeah, just like in a pretty pessimistic place about the state of the world, and listening to these elder, mostly trans people talk about, how they really like came together to fight in this, you know, way that kind of was the genesis in a lot of ways with other things of the beginning of a queer rights movement, and how much that was about like solidarity and just sticking together, and that was the power that they had. I think that that's like a lesson that a lot of us took from that, in rewatching that, and just feeling that there's a sense of hope, almost kind of something me and lots of the people that worked on the film talked about, is just like kind of, if we have to do it again, we can. Like, we need to learn from the past and learn, how we fight these fights. And so I think that a lot of us were looking for kind of inspiration, motivation, strength, and found that in these oral histories. And yeah, as in terms of approaching the artist, I think the majority of the people, two or three of the five artists, had not heard of Compton's before. And so I think I tried to kind of keep it very vague before the process of actually sitting down and having folks watch the archival tapes, because I did want to, the first question I asked afterwards was, if they had heard of this before, and how this fit into their like understanding of San Francisco history, and also, trans history. And I think a common theme for a lot of us was just that, because of, like you mentioned, the repression of trans history in media and education, so many of us have just very, very little understanding of the fights and the people that came before us that made the world that it is today. And so I think, that was an incredibly moving experience for me, and part of why I wanted to recreate it with others. And I think, like Benny says at the end of the film, it's the really underscored for all of us, like how much intergenerational knowledge, both, from our elders, and then also passing those histories forward and trying to like bring things to life out of the archive, is going to be like a huge part of, the ongoing struggle for queer and trans liberation.
Yay. Thank you so much, Drew. That was beautifully put. Um, now let's switch gears to somebody just exploring San Francisco, right? Like, I think one of the cool things about San Francisco is there's always something new to uncover and a new way to like figure out how to navigate life there. And Valentina, I'd love to just hear more from you about like what was it like engaging in a project like this while also kind of learning how to be in a brand new place? Like, did you find it helpful to kind of already have like a filmmaking friend in town? How have you kind of settled in? And how is your art evolving now that you're in San Francisco?
Yes, it was a very nice challenge. This for me is the first time that I'm living outside my country, so it was a big challenge for me. But I don't know. Well, Argentina is not having a very good time right now in the economy way. So to arrive here was nice because I know I can see more opportunities here, and there is a big community, art community here that's they support each other a lot. So for me, it was very embracing that when I arrived here. And I don't know, in art wise, it was very inspiring for me because I don't know, I play a lot with the signs and all that advertising, and I don't know, the US is one of the biggest countries in the developing of design and advertising. So for me, it was very inspiring to come here. I don't know, and to find Paul, that is the director that makes this film about me and my art and everything. And I don't know, was very give me a lot of power to continue my exploration here. So for now, I'm having a very good time here, and I'm very
That's
happy
awesome.
to be part of this selection of presenting our film here. So
We're
thank
so glad to have you and welcome to our city. Thanks so much for sharing.
you.
Stephen, I would love to switch gears to kind of talk about the process of objectivity when you're telling such a personal story. Like how did you, I know that it was a very evolving process as you're kind of figuring out how to put things together, but right, there's something that can be personal that is just a home movie, and then something that kind of transcends that tells me more of a universal story. And I think that's what you've achieved with your film. So can you kind of like, was that a difficult process? Like how did you kind of keep the big picture in mind as you went about constructing your project?
Oh wow, that's a great question. It was really hard to navigate that because um, when you're telling something so personal, it's easy to just like kind of go down certain rabbit holes and then be like, wow, I'm writing, but it's turning into a journal entry. It's no longer like a story or something that I even want to share necessarily in this film. So I really had to do a lot of like reeling things back, like taking some time away and then rereading what I'd written, especially in terms of like my narration. Um, I use that to help kind of like tie these very separate things together. But I didn't want it to be like an overwhelming like part of it where I still wanted to leave a lot of the interpretation like open to the audience. And um, so I think I did a lot of that in the edit, like trying to see places where I could actually cut things that I was saying and then just let the images speak for themselves. Um, there's like one section around the time where I turned 24. Um, that whole thing was like I didn't know if it was gonna make its way into this film, but that was just a lot of like candid footage of my family, and I wanted to capture like our family dynamic and like capture how um, the relationships are between like immigrant and first generation families, like members of the family. Um, so that I wanted to include that contrast where the footage there could kind of speak for itself, and I wasn't like as like it wasn't as much from my perspective as it was just like, you know, shots that I guess like the filmmaking term would be like cinema verite. You're kind of just like showing what's happening and then letting the audience interpret that. So yeah, it was hard. I tried to strike a balance. And I think that's basically I'll wrap it up there.
I mean, you did it very deftly. I think that one of the hardest things, especially in documentary filmmaking, is mastering the art of visual storytelling in a way that you feel like you've like achieved alliteration without relying on other tools. So really wanted to commend you for the way that you kind of put all of this together because it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
And all of your films are very beautiful. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have today, audience. But a huge thank you to our filmmakers. And thank you to our audience for showing up. And hopefully you're watching all the movies at home and having a good time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.